to nepotrebujete tak...
We have to look at consumers' needs.
Exactly, lebo som bol na také...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bratislava. Welcome to Central European Gas Congress, which is organized by Slovak Gas and Oil Association together with companies Ustream and Nafta. There are several reasons why we three subjects organizing this event, because all three of us are celebrating different anniversaries in the coming period. This year, Ustream is marking 50 years since the start of the natural gas transit through Slovakia. Slovak Gas and Oil Associations will celebrate its 30th anniversary together with Slovak Republic in the 1st January. And also the company Nafta is marked its 110th years since the discovery of the natural gas in the territory of Slovak Republic. And it will come early in the next year. But more important reasons why we are here is the current situation on the gas and energy market in the Europe. The Russian and Ukrainian conflict has completely rewritten the map of the gas in the Europe as we known in the many decades before. Russia has ceased to be the main supplier of gas in Europe, which is now Norway and LNG suppliers. The issue of energy security has come to the forefront of discussion and policies, as well how to deal with the high prices, and in particular with connection the fall in the gas supply and the high uncertainty about the future. We therefore also want to discuss ways of becoming more self-sufficient in terms of gas. Slovakia is the gas crossroad of Europe, and currently we are the second most gasified country in the European Union. So we already want to use this massive infrastructure also for the other type of gases like hydrogen and biomethane, which give us also greater opportunity to be more energy self-sufficient in the future. Another big issue is also the energy saving. Hopefully is not very cold in this room, because the temperature is set on 16 degrees. So we are starting also with this small addition to save energy. We hope that you will find the discussion of these topics interesting, and you will find answers to many questions raised. So at the beginning, please let me giving the floor to the new elected president of the Slovak Gas and Oil Associations, Rastislav Ňukovič, who will greet you with a short speech.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you here in Bratislava, in my name, in name of Ustream, and in name of Slovak Gas and Oil Association. It is very interesting occasion, as it was said by Richard. This Congress has quite a long tradition, and in the past there was rotating organization of V4 countries, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland. As it was said, there are several reasons why we organized this Congress. It was always a platform to share views on different problems of different participants, and especially to come with interesting and innovative solutions. And I think these days shows that it's more than necessary to discuss and to bring some solutions. And I'm really looking forward for interesting speeches of panelists and networking with you during the breaks. The second reason was mentioned as well, and these are these gas anniversaries. I would like to draw your attention to this book, which you can find on the corridor. It's called, or its name is 50 Years of Natural Gas in Slovakia. Basically, Ustream has 50 years, and I hope that another 50 you will have. Basically, you can find a lot of information about the history of our system, about its construction, dispatching, maintenance, and of course, people involved. And it's really hot. Just from the press, it was delivered just yesterday, and I realized that age of this book is the same as me as newly elected president, only one day. So I hope that another successful days, especially for gas business, will come. Thank you once again and welcome.
Thank you very much to Rastislav. And on this place, originally, we have promised a video message from Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Maroš Šefčovič. Unfortunately, due to unexpected reason, he couldn't send this message, so we have to apologize him. And now we can start discussion in the first panel, where we primarily will talk about the energy security on the European Union countries, especially Central Europe, which is linked also to reducing the dependence on supplies from Russia, and we will also touch any actual topics, also the European Union initiatives concerning the high prices, and so on. So let me introduce the panelists. First of all, Mr. Petr Kremský, who is the chairman of the Economic Committee of National Assembly of the Slovak Republic. Mr. Robert Heischel, member of European Parliament and also member of the ITRE committee. Mr. Andreas Steger, who is vice president of IGU. And Mr. Gottfried Steiner, the chief executive officer of Central European Gas Hub. You can also ask and raise your questions via Slido. So it's in disposal, and also this panel will be semi-linguistic, so we will use English and also Slovak. So let me start with first speech delivered by Mr. Steger.
Thank you, Richard, and Dobrý deň to everybody. I hope my pronunciation is not too bad. Thanks again for having me here. We met last year in Mount Tatras, and I recall a very good experience and dialogue there. Unfortunately, this year starts with a very different setting. The war, if I'm not wrong, is in day 211 today, and we have indeed a very different and difficult situation to face. I'm representing the International Gas Union, which claims to be the global voice of gas. But let me be frank, as from March the 3rd, our executive committee decided to suspend all Russian entities within the association in response of the situation we are facing. So it's very difficult times and very unprecedented times we have to face. Let me step back 1 year ago when we discussed different matters or similar matters in a different context. I spoke about access, meaning the fact that we have to look at how to make energy reliability, secure, and affordability a pillar of what we aim to achieve in any aspect of our energy business. Access was one point. The second point was socio-economic development. We have to be clear about the fact that energy is needed for promoting development in our economies, to make people living more comfortable, more in line with their expectations. And it's not just in Europe. Let me be clear. In other geographies, the priority today is food. And the fifth is climate change. I'll come back to that. But sustainability and environment are indeed very crucial. And I think the gas industry is indeed delivering, and in Europe more so, for making our industry more compliant and more fit for purpose for the challenge that we have to face in this 21st century. All of that, in my last year's speech, was coupled with a concept of international cooperation. Because we cannot, and we are seeing the more so in Europe in these very days, think to solve it all alone. I appreciated Ratislav mentioning about the fact that in certain regions, and more so here in Central Eastern Europe, you have been developing a good cooperation. Let me share with you an anecdote. 1995, I was in my final university degree thesis, and my degree thesis, by coincidence, was discussing about transition of state-owned enterprises to market economies in this region. So it's transition and this region are two words that are accompanying me since 1995. Indeed, what is needed is to reflect also on transition. My transition is this. I have to wear glasses nowadays, and for sure I will not go back. That's clear. On energy, we have an evolution. We have many options. We have different paths. We have different technologies to pursue. We cannot leave any option untapped. And for sure, gas is one of the best options to meet both needs of the consumers and the climate needs. Where are we today with respect to last year? Of course, the war is making people suffering, very close to your borders. And indeed, it's creating a lot of tensions around the world in many respects. We have somehow, let me be blunt, discovered that natural gas is also used for fertilizers. Oh, I didn't know that. It was just for power generation, as the narrative in Europe was, I think. And that's something that we have to acknowledge, the fact that there are multiple uses of this product elsewhere. Investments. We have been very vocal about investments in new things, and it's good. We have to innovate. But we cannot afford to have a reduction of investments in the traditional oil and gas sector by 50% globally in the last years and be complacent. Why so? Because energy demand is growing, is not reducing. We have to acknowledge the fact that if there is one certainty about 2050, is the fact that, depending on estimates, we will have 1.5 to 2 billion people more on this planet, and not in Europe. So Europe, of course, has a role to play, but we have to take care about the others as well. And taking care about the others as well is the fact that we have been somehow, again in Europe, somehow dogmatic in terms of environmental targets, as if we were the root and the end of all stories. We are, of course, important, and we have to lead the game, but taking care of the fact that we have to have more cooperation again in terms of dealing with climate challenge. Europe stands for about 8 to 9% of global emissions, and we have to reduce them. But in any respect, we have to create a better environment for everybody else to contribute to that. In that respect, again, technology that we are developing in the gas industry in Europe is best placed to have the benchmark, the best practice to be exported in other countries. Not the other way around, reducing options in Europe to make others worse. An interesting and somehow unexpected report came to the public from the Environmental Defense Funds in the last months. And it was saying that M&A in the oil and gas sector is creating more emissions. Why so? Because the majors who are well committed to ESG targets, when they are divesting to independents or others who are not committed to the same ESG, are making the emissions of the same assets worse. So we have to be careful about how to improve the standards and make them, of course, a good starting point for everybody. I could discuss a lot about what's going on around the world. I'll mention just one case, and I'll be back to Europe in a second. Pakistan, which is not by far a small market, had to plan blackouts because they were not having the capability, financial capability, to attract LNG cargoes in their country because of the price crunch we are seeing in the market globally. Let me be back to Europe now. And I had in my notes two different, let's say, starting points to think about. The first one is the recent congratulations to Ustream and Gas System for the new interconnection that Commissioner Kadri Simpson well publicized on the European Commission website. And rightly so, because it was, of course, not a European fostered project. It was a project that, to me, was fostered by Slovak and Polish entities and companies. We have to promote new investments. ENTSO-G, in their report this summer, was finally saying that we need more investment to connect better Europe. We had, in 2009, the so-called reverse flow regulation about security supply, because that was one of the first emergencies. Well, my first emergency was in 2005-06. And at that time, in Italy, I released strategic storage, something that we have to think about. But the other interesting part to me is that we still have, I quote, a statement from the EIB chair. To put it mildly, gas is over. We are not going to finance gas projects, nor in Europe, nor elsewhere. And recall how much traveling this summer has been done to promote new investments in production in Africa and elsewhere in the world. We have to commit to new production also in Europe. We have resources, we have capability, we have technical expertise to make it happen. And these two elements, the praise of the starting of a new interconnection and the lack of understanding of the fact that we need a better financing situation, is somehow requiring more pragmatism in our engagement with industry and policymakers. I would say we have to review our vision. Again, making the targets right, but arriving to targets alive. I am not prepared to win the gold medal at the Olympics. Whatever training I'll do, trust me, I cannot. So we have to be careful of not losing our targets because of just putting the bar high. And don't get me wrong, I was the initiator of the so-called Gas for Climate initiative that today is promoting also the European hydrogen backbone back in 2017. But if there is one thing that we have to care about is, again, not reducing options until they are available, commercially viable, technically sustainable in all respects. Otherwise, paraphrasing an old movie, we can get lost in transition, not lost in translation. And in that respect, we have also to recall the fact that, finally, I would say, the International Energy Agency has started to flag at other dependencies, not just the gas dependency. Gas dependency is very strong in Europe, and we have to work on that. But other materials, other mineral resources are very critical in any transition. And we have to take care about that as well. So it's indeed a challenge to look at. Europe and the next winter. We have enjoyed a flurry of LNG cargoes coming from the US. There was also one cargo arriving to the UK from Australia recently. We have somehow lost in the narrative, in some respect, the fact that we are enjoying, so to speak, the results of the shale gas revolution. Let me recall the fact that last year, a European company was blocked by its own government to sign a long-term contract with US producers because of the green impact of this LNG. Something that we are forgetting about. And about the same geography, I will not mention that geography, but we will all look at that. We have some new French-German interconnections to be looked at, and Spanish-French interconnection to be looked at. But again, it's not just on the western part of the European, let's say, energy system that we have to look at projects. We have to, again, make fluid interconnectivity available, with the possibility to use these infrastructures also for new gases, for sure. But again, it's a mixture of things. We have to be absolutely pragmatic and delivering every day. We are now having a very good result on the underground gas storage. I was in the underground gas storage for many years, so it's a piece of my heart, that business. And it's fundamental. But look at what the UK did. The UK, in the last years, closed their largest storage facility because it was not market sustainable. And now they are putting on the table £1 billion to revitalize that facility. And by the way, according to some estimates I read yesterday, the overall spending to manage the energy crisis so far without the bailouts we are reading about has been in Europe about $500 billion. $500 billion. What awful amount of investment we could have done with the fraction of that investment, of that money put into this energy crisis. I mentioned the LNG and the US market. Let's recall the fact that we are also enjoying another important element. China. China today is having the first in the gas history, recent gas history, it has the first year of reduction of demand because of the COVID lockdown policies they are having. They were #1 LNG importers last year for the first time in history, with about 80 MTPA. They are going less than 70 today. My crystal ball is saying that not if, but when Chinese gas market will return to economic growth, there will be extra tension on that market as well. So let's look at not just this winter, which will be tough, but the winter to come and the year after as well. So we have to promote new investments very rapidly. And again, it's very important to promote interactions and cooperations. I read very carefully the MOUs being signed by the European Commission with, for instance, Israel and Egypt. It's very good to ask other people to invest. It's very difficult for me to understand the logic of saying, by the way, recall that by 2030 gas demand in Europe will be lowering. So what's the incentive to them? I'm not sure. Also because, in that respect, from the US standpoint, we have, since March this year, more than 10 long-term contracts been signed by US producers to Chinese gas companies, and very few, to say few, to Europe. So we have the limitations to be taken out. Why 2049 is the deadline for long-term contracts? We have to promote CCUS on the other side. We cannot just take options out, I repeat. And options to be looked at are, of course, on REPowerEU. Of course, green gases are very important. They are not going to solve it all. Let's be frank. We have to promote new technologies. how to reduce carbon impact of the existing products. And a credible path is very important. Again, to arrive to 35 BCM of biomethane by 2030, in 7 years from now, it's quite a challenge. Because it's not just a challenge in terms of absolute value, because it's a different type of production. It's very dispersed. So it's very important to, again, have infrastructures to make that happen. And on hydrogen, let me be also somehow blunt. We have discussed for many years, too many years, about the color of hydrogen. It's like saying, and let me use my Italian, let's say, experience, the other day, where we are trying to make FSRUs happen in the fastest way, we had a common one, but one of the stakeholders asking, what will be the color of the FSRU? The color of the FSRU? Are you serious? We are in an energy crisis. You are challenging the authorization process for the color of the FSRU? We cannot make things if we are taking options out. Let me repeat that again and again. I'll be a broken record on this. And domestic production, I mentioned that, it's an awful thing to mention. No, it's a good thing to mention, because we can control how the emissions will be best met and how the energy will be best met, also at domestic level. But that we have to face also the credit crunch, the investment I mentioned. We have to, again, have ESG metrics not being an impediment, but a facilitator. We have to have financial institutions back on board. I was last week in Latin America with a development bank fostering use of gas in the region. And they said, I'm not quoting anybody, but saying, look at Europe, don't make the same mistakes. So we have many challenges ahead, one of which is the so-called price cap. Price cap has been thought I've been discussing about for the last 3 or 4 months. Honestly speaking, I have no solution to share with you. It's very difficult. It's a very complex matter. I'm not sure it will be something to be implemented soon. And of course, we have to reason how this decision will affect the remaining part of the market functioning we are still having in the gas and energy system at large. Because there, I think we have, again, an important rollover effect on how the companies like yourselves will behave in terms of new contract stipulations and new engagement with consumers. I am very, very optimistic, and I think statistics and delivery are accompanying me in that statement, that the industry, the gas industry, is delivering, is continuing to deliver every single minute. And we have not just the delivery, but we have the vision to look at combining things for today and for tomorrow. So if I have to conclude, cooperation is key, not just within Europe, but outside our borders, making options more and more on the table. Then the market will decide which will be the best option for them when we will have a possibility of a portfolio of selections to be looked at. Let me conclude my initial remarks to, again, congratulate to Ustream for the first 50 years. I'm a little bit older than that, but it's fine as well. And for NAFTA, I was not aware about the 110 years of the first domestic production. That is a very important target, and I hope there will be additional, let's say, exploration and productions to go. And to the Slovak Gas and Oil Association for the first 30 years. I'm sure this energy, this competence, this know-how is even more today needed to go forward and surpass this energy crisis we are facing. So with that, I'll try to respond to your questions afterwards, but for the moment being, Ďakujem.
Thank you very much, Andrea. A lot of interesting issue which you raised, and I think it's a good starting point for our discussion. So, I see, gentlemen, you made many notes concerning this speech. So, my first question for the other panelists is one part of Andrea's speech. From your point of view, how we are here in the Central Europe prepare for the coming winter concerning the gas supplies, concerning the energy supplies. Maybe I add to you, Mr. Kremski, because in the previous weeks and months you were the strong criticizer of the Ministry of Economy, and you are doubted about maybe their informations that to how extent we are prepared for the winter. So please, we can start with you.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for the question. I will now switch to Slovak because I'm not very familiar with gas industry vocabulary. So, excuse me, I will speak in Slovak. Takže dobré ráno ešte raz. Áno, ja som trošku bol tak v polemike s pánom ministrom hospodárstva bývalým, a išlo tam o to, že on začiatkom júla s veľkou slávou oznámil, že máme dosť plynu do konca zimy a žiaľ tie jeho tvrdenia vychádzali z toho, že plyn potečie na Slovensko ďalej ako vždy, čo teda ja som pokladal za veľmi naivnú predstavu. A v podstate dnes sa to potvrdzuje, že Nord Stream 1 stojí, dodávky cez Českú republiku sa výrazne znížili v posledných dňoch. Z Ukrajiny to zatiaľ stále tečie, ale nevieme dokedy. A v podstate dnes sa blížime k tomu, aby sme mohli povedať, že ak by to naozaj prestalo tiecť na Slovensko úplne, tak by sme toho plynu mohli mať do konca zimy. Myslím si, že ešte také 2 týždne, keď sa budú tie zásobníky plniť, tak snáď budeme tak ako so zaťatými zubami, prižmúrenými všetkými 4 očami, teda mojimi, povedať, že no, mohli by sme vydržať, ak nebude veľmi mrznúť. Takže to bola tá moja polemika. A či je Stredná Európa pripravená na zimu? No, myslím si, že nikto z nás nebol pripravený na túto energetickú krízu úplne tak, ako ju prežívame a čo ešte môže prísť. Myslím si, že trošku sme zažili ten rok 2009, tak sme si to aj vedeli predstaviť, že môže sa to aj úplne zastaviť, ale asi sme si nikto nevedeli predstaviť, že zemný plyn sa môže stať zbraňou. A vieme, že ten posledný rok, až možno aj 2, rok a pol minimálne, sa naozaj zemný plyn stal zbraňou, najprv finančnou, na európskych trhoch a potom aj teda nástrojom vydierania zo strany Ruska a ruského režimu. V tom zmysle, že alebo teda s tým výsledkom, že dnes Rusko dodáva výrazne menej do Európy ako v minulých rokoch, ale dostáva za to oveľa viac peňazí. Myslím si, že to je sen každého dodávateľa, každého výrobcu, že dodám ti len polovicu, ale zaplatíš mi 2-krát toľko ako predtým. A to, že toto vlastne ruský režim dosiahol a tie ceny v Európe sa prudko zvýšili a vlastne veľmi veľa krajín v Európe sa obáva zimy, obáva sa mrazov, obáva sa, ako to prežije, to je výsledok vlastne tejto plynovej vojny, môžeme to tak povedať. A výsledok je ten, že plyn sa stal v podstate vzácnosťou, čo možno vás ako plynárov by mohlo tešiť. Zase na druhej strane ten plyn tým, že sa používa ako zbraň, dostal také black PR a v podstate dnes veľmi veľa krajín v Európe uvažuje, ako vlastne od neho úplne odísť, ani nie z tých zelených dôvodov, ale kvôli tomu, že vlastne sa stáva zbraňou. Takže myslím si, že Stredná Európa nie je úplne na to pripravená, čo môže prísť a čo sa môže stať. Myslím si, že mnohí ľudia by si to vedeli predstaviť až vtedy, keď by im tiekla už len studená voda v sprche a v byte by sa im kúrilo na možno 15 stupňov a museli by chodiť všade pešo alebo na bicykli alebo verejnou dopravou. Myslím si, že nikto z nás si toto celkom nevie predstaviť, čo by sa mohlo stať, ale ale stať sa to môže už len preto, že plyn sa nevyužíva len v energetike, ale vieme, že je to významný zdroj aj v priemysle. A vieme, že dnes stojí na Slovensku fabrika, ktorá vyrába AdBlue a v podstate jeden z najväčších, ak nie vôbec najväčší výrobca v Európe. A neviem, keby som tu teraz dal hlasovať, že koľký z vás používajú do svojho auta AdBlue, tak asi by sa veľmi veľa rúk zdvihlo, možno, že aj väčšina. A myslím si, že to asi si nikto z nás nevie predstaviť, že všetky tieto autá by sa museli zastaviť. Takže myslím si, že naozaj máme nad čím rozmýšľať a ja verím, že aj na tejto konferencii príde veľa podnetov, čo s tým. Ja tiež mám pár podnetov, ale dám priestor aj mojim spolurečníkom, takže asi zatiaľ toľko.
Robert? Tak ak znie otázka, najprv sa tiež, let me introduce myself. I'm Robert Heischel, I'm a member of the European Parliament. And also I was told that I can choose the language I would speak, so I would use my maternal language, Slovak. Takže ďakujem pekne aj za pozvanie, aj za otázku. A pokiaľ ide o tú pripravenosť, tak ja si myslím, že mohlo by to samozrejme vyzerať aj horšie v tom našom regióne, keďže ten náš región naozaj bol najviac z celej Európskej únie závislý na dodávkach plynu z Ruska. A s mnohými vecami, ktoré tu už boli povedané, môžem súhlasiť. Ako povedal Andrea, naozaj, ja si myslím, že dnes v tejto krízovej situácii, keď nevieme, aký bude ďalší vývoj, žiadne možnosti nemôžeme vylúčiť, ale naopak musíme si ich držať, lebo to sú naše nástroje, po ktorých môžeme siahať. A na jednej strane je pravda, že ten plyn, zemný plyn dostal negatívne PR tým, čo sa deje a že je používané toto médium ako strategická geopolitická zbraň. Na druhej strane ho potrebujeme, pretože je to niečo, čo naozaj nám umožní toto prechodné obdobie niekoľko rokov prežiť a jednoducho akokoľvek aj ja presadzujem, aby sme dostávali do európskej energetiky obnoviteľné zdroje, tak bez toho plynu sa nezaobídeme, takisto ako sa nezaobídeme bez jadra. A v tomto som naozaj aj rád, že sa nám v Európskom parlamente podarilo, aj keď pomerne tesnou väčšinou presadiť taxonómiu pre plyn a pre jadro, to znamená zaradiť tieto dva energetické médiá medzi tie, ktoré síce nie sú úplne zelené a nie sú trvalo udržateľné, obnoviteľné, ale sú niekde medzi a umožňa, aby dostali ten label perspektívnych zdrojov ešte na ďalšie 10 ročia. Tým pádom aj tí investori dostali také isté povzbudenie, aby sa nebáli ďalej investovať aj do budovania plynovej infraštruktúry, čo teraz vidíme, ako je to dôležité, či už ide o LNG terminály, či už ide o prepojenia, hlavne medzi štátmi. Vieme, že v tej západnej Európe sa to veľmi zanedbalo a neexistujú v podstate dostatočné prepojenia ani medzi Španielskom a Francúzskom, ani medzi Francúzskom a Nemeckom, čo teraz nám veľmi chýba a ohrozuje to v podstate bezpečnosť našich dodávok. Takisto tu by som rád možno, že povedal, že je dobre, že aj bývalá vláda Roberta Fica v spolupráci aj s Marošom Šefčovičom, komisárom vtedajším pre energetiku a z peňazí Európskej únie zabezpečila, že sa vybudovali prepojenia medzi Slovenskom, Rakúskom, Slovenskom, Českou republikou, Slovenskom, Maďarskom a teraz, že vlastne došlo k otvoreniu prepojenia medzi Poľskom a Slovenskom. Je tiež dobré, že už tie peniaze idú do budovania tých terminálov, do zvyšovania ich kapacity a že diverzifikujeme vlastne, alebo pripravujeme sa na to, aby sme sa mohli aj v tomto regióne Strednej Európy dostať aj k inému ako ruskému plynu, lebo je to jednoducho strategicky nevyhnutné. Tie zásobníky, ako viete, už sú naplnené v rámci celej Európskej únie tuším už teraz na 86%. Ale viete, zásobníky naozaj slúžia na to, aby v prípade nejakých väčších výpadkov toku plynu sme mohli po nich siahať, ale nie je to ten základ. My stále potrebujeme, aj ten plyn prichádzal. A na Slovensku, ako viete, stále prichádza aj ten plyn z Ruska a viac menej my ho potrebujeme a keď ho nebudeme vedieť dostať, tak musíme ho vedieť nahradiť. Čiže pre nás všetky ďalšie cesty sú samozrejme priateľné a v tomto naozaj veľmi podporujem, čo bolo povedané, že Žiadne, akože no options should be excluded. Ale naopak musia byť preskúmané a v prípade potreby po nich treba siahať. Potom ďalším kľúčovým slovom si myslím, že tu je spolupráca a s tým súvisí aj tá solidarita. A to je jednak solidarita medzi členskými štátmi, medzi tými štátmi, ktoré majú napríklad plynu dosť alebo majú dosť elektriny a tými, ktorí ho nemajú. My nemôžeme teraz sa tváriť Európskej únii izolovane, keď sme všetko robili preto, aby sme budovali ten spoločný trh s energiami. A nemôže sa stať, aby jednoducho sme pristupovali k nejakému zoštátňovaniu. V tomto možno, že smer, ale asi budeme hovoriť aj neskôr. Asi sa nebudú naši partneri Európskej únii a ani teda Európska komisia v Bruseli dívať nejako veľmi chválihodne na to, na čom sa včera slovenská vláda dohodla. A to napríklad, pokiaľ ide o to využívanie zásobníku rezervného v Bojanoviciach v Čechách, čo je s tým spôsobom zoštátnenia. Alebo napríklad, pokiaľ ide aj teda o ten zákaz vývozu elektrickej energie do zahraničia v prípade teda toho núdzového stavu, ktorý nie je nejakým spôsobom veľmi dobre definovaný a je to možno, dá sa povedať, zneužiteľné. A teda bude určite treba predtým, ako tento zákon, v ktorom sú zase veci, ktoré už mali dávno prísť, ako je zastropovanie cien pre koncových spotrebiteľov, tak sú veci, ktoré bude treba určite zlepšiť a myslím si, že je síce dobre a konečne niečo také už vláda prerokovala, ale má to strašne veľa, by som povedal, rizikových miest, s ktorými sa bude musieť zaoberať aj parlament a ktorým bude treba, aby predchádzali rokovania a konzultácie s Európskou komisiou v Bruseli. Ja si myslím, že stále na stole a ja aj potom kričím aj v Európskom parlamente, volám potom, aby slovenská vláda naozaj apelovala, aby vedela využiť, lebo Európska komisia si myslím len čaká na to, aby také vlády, ako je vláda Slovenska, ale aj iných štátov v strednej a východnej Európe, požiadali o uvoľnenie, o shifty, o jednoducho presuny peňazí z kohéznych fondov, z kohéznej politiky, či z kohéznych štruktúrálnych a ďalších investičných fondov, to, čo známe, čo u nás poznáme hlavne pod skratkou ESHIF, jednoducho z týchto fondov použiť na možné transfery, sociálne kompenzácie, dotovanie cien a podobne. Lebo my vieme, že slovenská vláda zatiaľ neukazuje a nevykazuje žiadnu, by som povedal, garanciu, že dokáže tie nevyužité čiastky zo eurofondov, hlavne z toho predchádzajúceho obdobia, využiť. Tak prečo ich nevyužiť tu? A prečo zachádzať k takýmto krajným opatreniam, ako je až pomaly zoštátňovanie a podobne? Čiže v tomto prípade si myslím, že máme ešte na čom robiť, ale už som išiel do konkrétnych vecí, čo sa týka Slovenska, čiže celkovo treba povedať, je dobre, že máme tých 86% v zásobníkoch, ale určite by bolo treba, aby nejaký tok plynu ďalej prebiehal. Určite treba ďalej investovať, v tomto prípade tiež aj my na úrovni Európskej únie robíme všetko, aby aj z programu spomínaného Repower išlo čo najviac peňazí. Teraz je to v podstate 20 miliard už cez aj stabilizačnú rezervu trhu, ktoré pôjdu na dobudovanie infraštruktúry spojenej s LNG a s potrubiami, aby to zabezpečilo aj prístup plynu do tých najviac remote, do tých najvzdialenejších regiónov od tých LNG terminálov, ako je práve štáty, ako je Slovensko, Maďarsko, alebo teda hlavne Rakúsko, Česká republika. To je jedna vec. A čo sa týka samozrejme elektrické energie, je určite dobré a je šťastím, že teda sa nám podarilo spustiť tretí blok jadrovej elektrárne Mochovce a určite na Slovensku nebude až tak hroziť bezpečnosť dodávok, teda či budeme mať dostatok elektriny alebo plynu, ale skôr bude hroziť, ako si vláda poradí s týmito sociálnymi opatreniami vo vzťahu ku domácnostiam alebo nejakými podpornými mechanizmami, kompenzáciami alebo jednoducho nejakým subvencovaným cien pre koncových užívateľov z podnikateľského prostredia, keď vieme, že Slovensko má jeden z energeticky najnáročnejších priemyslov vôbec v rámci celej Európskej únie. No a potom máme samozrejme malé a stredné podniky, ktorým hrozí kvôli tomuto zdražovaniu cien energií, ale aj vôbec kvôli inflácii, ale aj kvôli ďalším spomínaným problémom keď dochádza, ako viete, k narušovaniu, čoraz väčšiemu narušovaniu dodávateľsko-odberateľského reťazca, čo sa týka nielen teda energetických surovín, ale pokiaľ ide aj o kriticky dôležité suroviny, ktoré sa používajú napríklad vo výrobe batérií a podobne. Čiže je dobré a správne, že niektoré veci sa prijali. Tie najnovšie opatrenia, ktoré sa posudzujú teraz na Európskej únii a ktoré vychádzajú z návrhu z minulého týždňa zo strany Európskej komisie, tak ako viete, prebiehajú teraz rokovania na úrovni Coreperu. Pripravuje sa dohoda na ministerské rokovanie, ktoré bude 30. septembra v Bruseli a kde už by sa mali konkrétne prijať niektoré opatrenia. Ja len spomeniem, ale asi sa budeš na to, Richard, pýtať. Čiže ide hlavne teda ako viete, hlavne nie je tam teda zastropovanie cien ruského plynu, vôbec tam nie je, ale naopak je tam teda akože, ako siahnuť potom, a to ľudí u nás aj na Slovensku, až v celej Európskej únii zaujíma, ako siahnuť potom, že tie energetické firmy a tí sprostredkovateľ, tí dodávateľ, ktorí zbohatli na tých cenách, zvyšujúcich sa cenách plynu, ale aj elektrické energie, ako tie peniaze dostať teda tým, ktorí potrebujú a ktorí teraz budú nútení platiť, alebo už sú nútení platiť vyššie faktúry. A to je to napríklad navrhované opatrenia, pokiaľ ide o tých inframarginálnych výrobcov, teda výrobcov vyrábajúcich, ako vieme, za nižšie ceny, pokiaľ ide o elektrickú energiu. Potom samozrejme je sporenie, ktoré nie je veľmi v takých regiónoch ako Slovensko. A ťažko to aj vysvetliť ľuďom, že prečo máme my sporiť, ako prečo, tak aj o tom sa samozrejme rokuje a počíta s tým aj České predsedníctvo Európskej únie. Ako viete, ide o úsporu minimálne 5% v tých píkových hodinách. No a potom sú to aj ďalšie opatrenia a samozrejme viaceré z nich sú protirečivé a aj veľmi otázne, do akej miery na úrovni Európskej únie sa dokážeme na nich zhodnúť. Čiže zatiaľ toľko.
Thank you, Robert. We come later maybe to many of these topics which you raised. Mr. Steiner, please maybe your position. I'm happy that you are here because you are representative of the power exchange. So it's also another important subject for the gas market.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for having me. Thank you for the introduction. First of all, congratulations for the anniversaries, 30, 50 and 110. I think the Austrian gas industry is very linked with the Slovak industry. That's why I'm very grateful to be here. The hub Baumgarten used to be our common place before 2013 for putting the gas in this region back and forth between Slovakia, Austria and the other areas here. So we build here on a common history, and that's why I'm especially grateful and congratulate you for this anniversary here. How are we together prepared for this winter? Thank you for this kind of this is the big animal in this room which we're having, right? So the energy security for the upcoming winter. And how are we prepared for this? I think this was mentioned before. The war in the Ukraine was not expected. I think there were many who were saying there will be a war or not a war. Me personally, on this Thursday, I was really surprised and shocked, as actually many of you were. And that's why the question, were we prepared for this, is a bit of a wrong question right now, because this winter, last winter, we all could not imagine about actually what was happening in the last months. And even yesterday, I think with the news in Russia and the other escalation, I mean, I'm personally shocked about this, and so are many shocked about this, and the war in the Ukraine and the suffering of the people and everything. This makes something with us, I have to say, and we all feel this tragedy, and we all want to help. And I think that's one of the underlying factors of this energy security topic for this winter also. What was happening was that actually, the further the war was going, the less gas was coming from Russia. At the beginning, it was rather our decision, right? So gas flows dropped quite significantly in April, recovered slightly in May, came down again, and then afterwards, stepwise, actually Russia reduced. Before the time, we were reducing because of pricing topics in the long-term contracts, because of political topics. We were actually reducing gas from Russia, and then Russia was reducing the gas. There was less coming from the Ukraine because of the event on the eastern border where they claimed between the two parties, and therefore the flow was coming down. Then Nord Stream was reduced, and now Nord Stream is actually on a zero. So what we receive is gas via the Ukraine into our region, and we are receiving gas from the south via Turkstream and Turkstream extension to the southern region and the southeastern region of Europe, which is still there. But it was mentioned at the beginning by Andrea. I mean, it was the largest supplier of gas for Europe, and it's now anymore the largest supplier. And this gas has to come from somewhere. And actually, I have to say, I'm very surprised how good and how well we actually managed this crisis over the summer. End consumers have their gas, industry has their gas, and storages are almost full on a record high level. I mean, we can still put more gas in there, but we're already on a very high level, and it should be coming more to it, not only to fulfill the targets of the European Union, but to have as much gas available for this winter. And this is something which I would like to remind here, also as you're saying that one of our business lines is the gas exchange in Austria, that actually the markets were working very well. The markets were working very efficiently. And the reason and the story you're mentioning with Pakistan is a tragedy, right? But it's also a consequence of the market that the gas is flowing then where the higher prices are, and the high prices we are facing here are a result of the imbalance between supply and demand. On a very short term, very unexpected, we're losing a big share of our gas supply for Europe, also especially for this region, and still the market is able to offset this and to get additional gas into this region. The consequences here, very high gas prices, extremely high gas prices, I have to say. And the reason for these gas prices is at the end supply and demand. And I very liked the introduction here about the temperature. I felt the temperature here, and you're feeling that the temperature, but this is demand. And the question is, how much of the demand can we actually intentionally put down over the winter? How much demand will actually come down unintentionally? I mean, with these very high gas prices, our industry is facing competitive questions in every country. I think it's for the competitiveness of Europe, for the jobs, for the economy, for GDP, it's a disaster, most probably. We will feel the consequences. We hope we will not feel it in that sense. But I think it's a very high and extreme price level which we might feel over this. So the demand will also come down from this side. So in terms of the supply and demand balance, this is something why the prices are here. So how much are we prepared for this winter? I would say in this very unexpected, extreme environment in which we are doing very well.
My maybe short question on you. The politicians a lot of time maybe have desire to intervene, to influence the markets. So do you think that they, in this extreme situation, should leave them and maybe try to let them on their own development?
I think here what you have to distinguish are the different commodities. The prices spike on gas, the prices spike on electricity, the spike on coal, the spike on carbon. So carbon is actually very high. There's a high volatility in all of these markets. So that's a situation there. And it's all coming from the supply situation on gas, but actually also on the electricity side. I'm not an electricity expert, but if you hear the news about the nuclear power plants in France, about the dry weather, about the hydro and so on. I mean, this also makes something here. And what we need, and it was mentioned before, was a lot of is investment. Is investment in every aspect, especially on the power side here, in order to bring the supply up, in order to meet the demand and therefore to bring the prices down. If you intervene in these markets, you distort this price signal. And this price signal is actually important for bringing the demand down and it is important for investments. So therefore, any intervention in this market in every aspect has to be really carefully balanced. And what we see now on the European level, I think this is going into actually a pretty good way, in the sense that you look at what the market and how you can actually do in order to bring prices down and not distorting this price signal. I think that's very important, and to bring here a fair distribution between the renewables, wind and solar and so on, which are really benefiting windfall from this high price situation. And on the other hand, what is discussed, and it was done in every country, at least in Austria, this is now done, is to reduce the burden of these high prices on the consumers. Industry, households, and also the proposal here on the European level, I think this is something which can be put forward, because the consequences clearly are disastrous in every aspect, social aspects, political aspects, and so on and so on. So to do here something, I think that this is very important. And to mention this for the market itself, the market and these price spikes, they are also putting a burden on the energy industry. You have heard about the difficulties with Wienenergie, for example. You're seeing the situation in Germany with Uniper, with VNG, and with other companies. So being on this energy market nowadays is quite a difficult issue, where you have to look at your liquidity, where you have to look at how you can cope with this price situation. And what you have to avoid now is actually to let these prices also funnel through into the energy industry, and therefore you might have some chaotic situation. I understand what the Germans are doing with this liquidity support program, with the saving of Uniper, VNG and others, is actually to avoid this situation, because this is something which could put an extra burden on this whole situation.
Thank you very much. I have to also apologize Mr. Kremski, because he has to leave us in about 20 minutes for Parliament, and we are happy that you have only find some time to be here. And my question is, what is maybe your position to the latest proposal of government, Slovak government, concerning the dealing with this energy crisis and potential, scenarios with the shortages of gas or electricity? So, what is your position to it? Also, Robert raised this question.
Ďakujem. Ja možno do toho zaradím aj tú prvú otázku, ktorú máme v slajde. Jasne, možno prvá vec, ktorú treba povedať. Jasne.
Are price caps for consumers a desirable policy, as it can disincentivize savings which are now desperately needed? This is the question. So please.
Dobre, takže začnem možno tým, že treba povedať, že to, čo včera vlastne bolo schválené na vláde, čo dnes nám príde do parlamentu, je v podstate plán B. To, o čom hovoril pán Hajšel, to je plán A, to znamená nejaké spoločné riešenie na úrovni Európskej komisie. To teda hodnotíme a vlastne ono sa to trošku tak rodí. Na druhej strane ja som trošku skeptický k tomu, že sa naozaj podarí nájsť nejaké komplexné riešenie na úrovni Európskej únie, pretože tie trhy sú tak rozdielne a tak rozdielna je závislosť na plyne, na dodávkach elektriny, na výrobe, že myslím si, že veľmi ťažko nájsť niečo, čo bude pasovať všetkým. Myslím si, že práve preto je dôležité pripravovať plán B. Ja už niekoľko týždňov, možno že aj 2 mesiace sú to, hovorím o tom, že nakoniec príde k tomu, že budeme musieť tie ceny zastropovať. Jednoducho, to, čo sa tu spomína, či vlastne tie cenové stropy pre spotrebiteľov, pre odberateľov neprinesú ako keby ústup od šetrenia, ku ktorým by to malo vlastne tých spotrebiteľov priviesť. S tým možno súhlasiť a aj s tým, čo hovoril pán Steiner, že vlastne ten tlak dopytu a ponuky prináša v podstate želateľný efekt, to šetrenie. To je v poriadku, ja s týmto úplne súhlasím, ja som zástanca trhovej ekonomiky a neviditeľnej ruky trhu, ale tiež to musí mať svoje hranice. Ak by sme to aplikovali napríklad na jedlo, na potraviny, tak samozrejme, že veľmi veľa potravín sa dnes vyhadzuje v Európe a ide do odpadu. A keď ich ceny stúpnú, tak sa ich bude vyhadzovať určite menej. Na druhej strane nemôžeme sa dostať do stavu, že ľudia tu budú hladovať, pretože chlieb stojí 20 eur. Čiže to isté platí o elektrine a plyne, že samozrejme vieme, že veľa ľudí mrhá energiami, že kúria doma a pritom majú otvorenú vetračku, lebo však čerstvý vzduch treba. Ale zase na druhej strane nemôžeme to dohnať do situácie, že ľudia nebudú môcť kúriť a proste budú žiť v zime a energetickej chudobe. Čiže myslím si, že nie je cesta zdaniť treba zarábajúce firmy, potom tie peniaze vyplatiť na dotáciách, pretože tie peniaze skončia na účtoch finančných špekulantov na energetických trhoch. Myslím si, že hlavne ten trh s elektrinou sa úplne vymkol z kolbou a v podstate uletel a nechať ho ďalej akoby ovplyvňovať ceny elektriny pre spotrebiteľov by bolo veľmi nebezpečné nielen pre bežných občanov, ale hlavne pre európsky priemysel. Myslím si, že to by bolo veľmi nebezpečné naučiť firmy na to, že však akákoľvek bude cena, štát vám to vykompenzuje a nakoniec budete mať nízku. To si myslím, že by bolo veľmi nebezpečné. Ja si myslím, že tie úspory už aj nastávajú, že už aj nastali, že mnohé firmy naozaj dokonca znížili výrobu, investujú do obnoviteľných zdrojov, investujú do úspor, ale proste je veľmi dôležité, aby tá cena sa nedostala do oblasti, kde už je to pre nich nezvládnutelné a nedokážu prežiť. A myslím si, že takých firiem máme na Slovensku už veľmi veľa. A ak niečo neurobíme, tak naozaj nám tu domino efektom môže ľahnúť polovica ekonomiky. A to sa nestane len na Slovensku, to sa môže stať aj v ďalších krajinách. Čiže ja osobne som naozaj zástancom zastropovania cien. Nie som zástancom vyvlastnenia slovenských elektrární a podobných vecí. Myslím si, že to by bolo extrémne drahé riešenie, ktoré by neprinieslo až tak veľa, ako si od toho teda politici sľubujú. Ono to vyzerá tak pekne, možno populisticky, že však zobereme im to a my to budeme tu rozdeľovať. Ale myslím si, že toto by nebolo rozumné riešenie. Myslím si, že rozumné riešenie je dočasné, teraz ma neberte doslova, znárodnenie, ale v tom zmysle, že vlastne štát cez nejaké svoje spoločnosti vlastne zoberie elektrinu potrebnú pre Slovensko, alebo aspoň jej časť, veľkú časť, a vlastne dodajú odberateľom za primerané ceny, za ceny, ktoré budú ziskové aj pre výrobcov, distribútorov, predajcov elektriny, ale budú znesiteľné pre odberateľov. To si myslím, že je rozumné riešenie dočasne, kým sa vlastne tie trhy neupokoja a nezačnú naozaj reálne fungovať. A myslím si, že veľmi dôležitá je pritom tá vyváženosť. A samozrejme dôležité budú aj tie dotácie, ktoré aj spomínal pán Hajšel, možno z tých eurofondov, práve z toho ESHIFu, napríklad pre ľudí, ktorí majú centrálne kúrenie a ktorí síce môžu niečo ušetriť, ale v konečnom dôsledku sú závislí od ceny plynu, ktorú tá kotolňa ich dostane. A takých obyvateľov je na Slovensku, ak si dobre pamätám, nejaké 1,5 milióna minimálne. A mnohým z nich už v tomto roku oproti minulému roku kúrenie zdražilo 30-40%. Dokonca sú mestá, kde to bolo 50% medziročne. Čiže tam si myslím, že naozaj štát by mal pomôcť, pretože to je hlavne pre tých sociálne slabých ľudí naozaj veľmi ťažko zvládnutelné. A pokiaľ teda nebude aj nejaké riešenie pre ceny plynu, tak to zdraženie bude v budúcom roku medziročne možno 150-200%. A to si myslím, že si nemôžeme dovoliť, lebo tam by práve nastala tá energetická chudoba a jednoducho obrovská bieda tých ľudí, ktorí by naozaj ako sa zadlžili, mali obrovské nezaplatené faktúry, samozrejme to by tlačilo zase na dodávateľov tepla, na dodávateľov plynu, distribučné spoločnosti a tak ďalej. Čiže tým by sme si ako do ekonomiky natiahli obrovské dlhy a obrovskú druhotnú platobnú a terciálnu platobnú neschopnosť. Čiže akože tomuto sa určite treba vyhnúť, tomuto určite treba zabrániť. A ja som veľmi rád, že nový minister hospodárstva Karel Hirman toto naozaj vníma veľmi citlivo, na rozdiel teda od Richarda Sulíka, ktorý od začiatku roka nás presvedčal, že trh všetko vyrieši, trh to všetko dá do poriadku. No, trh už tu nie je, ja mám pocit, hej, že vlastne keď elektrina z 50 eur za megawatt hodinu vyletí na 1000, tak proste ten trh asi už úplne stratil svoju schopnosť. Samozrejme, ono sa to trošku zase zregulovalo a znížilo, ale myslím si, že stále to je na úrovniach, ktoré sú absolútne nepriateľné pre normálny ekonomický vývoj nielen na Slovensku, ale v celej Európe.
Thank you very much. Another issue and question for all of you. Robert mentioned the level of storage currently in the Europe. It's nearly 90%, but we know that this is for the winter not enough, because we still need to preserve, the permanent flow of the gas. What do you think, and what maybe how do you see the risk of the stopping of gas supplies from Russia, and if we have maybe sufficient alternatives to replace it? Concerning Slovakia, currently, as I know, it's the Russian supply only the 30% of the whole supplies. So what do you think about the alternatives, Mr. Kremsky?
No, myslím si, že ja som teda nikdy sa nevyslovoval za to, že by sme mali sa úplne odstrihnúť od ruského plynu. Ja si myslím, že veľmi dôležité, aby Slovensko malo alternatívu. Aby vlastne tu bola alternatíva, ktorá je konkurencieschopná, a ktorá je cenovo zaujímavá. A potom vlastne práve ten ruský plyn, ktorý sa stal zbraňou, už veľmi ťažko môže byť zbraňou, pretože keď jednoducho niekto chce tým vydierať, tak to zoberiem od niekoho iného. Čiže problém je tá naša závislosť. A myslím si, že tú závislosť sa počas tohto roku čiastočne podarilo znížiť. A myslím si, že je veľmi dôležité pracovať na viacerých veciach. Prvá vec sú alternatívne dodávky. Samozrejme, tam je LNG, sú tam iné zdroje. Hovoríme o Izraeli, Cypre, Egypte, Severnej Afrike, Azerbajdžan a tak ďalej, ale napríklad takisto alternatívne zdroje. Napríklad bioplyn je veľmi dobrý zdroj. Samozrejme, je to stále v plienkach, ale možno práve preto, že za tých posledných 10 rokov sme tam zaspali, že sa to nerozvíjalo. A nemyslím teraz len na tie klasické bioplynky. Nedávno mi jeden farmár povedal, že to je hriech robiť z kukurice bioplyn, že predsa máme biologický odpad a tak ďalej, ktorý nevyužívame. Čiže to je obrovská diskusia, že ako ďalej s týmto a čo podporovať. Ale sú tam aj vlastne ďalšie alternatívy. Čiže ja si myslím, že toto je veľmi dôležité, aby my sme mali jasný plán a išli podľa neho. Ja som už hneď, ak začala tá vojna na Ukrajine, začal hovoriť, že my potrebujeme akčný plán vlastne zníženia tej závislosti od Ruska. A ten plán vlastne, keďže ministerstvo hospodárstva sa veľmi k tomu nemalo, tak ja som nejaký pripravil a na úrovni premiéra vlastne to zavádzame a ten zahrňa rôzne veci, aj úspory, aj alternatívne zdroje a tak ďalej. Ale proste vlastná ťažba, presne to som zabudol spomenúť, to máme napísané, ale proste my musíme ísť bod po bode a vyčleniť prostriedky, podporu, čo to potrebuje. Vlastná ťažba je veľmi dôležitá. To je niečo, čo napríklad teraz meníme zákony v parlamente, aby to bolo možné jednoduchšie. Ako my si nemôžeme dovoliť, aby sa proste jeden vrt pripravoval 10 rokov, alebo proste dlhé roky. Proste to nejde. Jednoducho sme v situácii, keď sme závislí od krajiny, ktorá nás vyhlásila svojho nepriateľa a my teraz ideme riešiť proste mravčeky a chrobáčiky. To nejde. Ako potom naozaj to dopadne tak, že proste zažijeme tú zimu a možno to nás nejako prefacká a presvedčí, ale ja by som bol nerád. Ja som človek, ktorý rád predchádza problémom a nie ich rieši až vtedy, keď už dostane 5 faciek. Takže ja určite veľmi tlačím na to, aby tam bol jasný plán, aby sa išlo podľa neho a aby sa veci hýbali.
Ďakujem pekne. Robert? No na to, že tá závislosť od Ruska, zastavenie dodávok.
Chcem takú perličku povedať, že bolo tu povedané vlastne, že aj to, že tu máme v podstate dosť nízku teplotu, je znakom, že už sa snažíme sporiť. Ale mne sa zdá, že neviem, či úplne sporím, mne sa zdá, že tá zima, čo tu je, vychádza z toho, že je tu klíma zapnutá a tá klíma je nastavená na dosť nízku úroveň. Čiže ak klímujeme, tak ja si myslím, že sporíme. Ale možno, že sa mýlim, sa ospravedlňujem. Takže ja by som napríklad kompletne odporúčil tú klímu vypnúť, lebo si myslím, že už je dostatočne nízka teplota a netreba ešte klímovať ďalej. Takže ak by to organizátori mohli urobiť, určite mnohí by to tu privítali, lebo vidím, že viacerí sú zahalení v rôznych vestách a jednoducho to trpia. Ale pokiaľ ide o tú závislosť, áno, ja si myslím, že už v otázke bolo jasne naznačené, že tá závislosť a tie problémy s tou bezpečnostnou dodávok je stále tu. A určite tú zimu nejako prežijeme, ale uvedomme si prosím, že ak my máme v zásobníku okolo 100 miliard kubikov a cez zimu tá Európa vie spotrebovať aj s úsporami možno, že 150, tak my jednoducho potrebujeme stále ten tok plynu. Čiže nám nestačí, že povieme, že máme naplnené zásobníky na 90% a možno, že koncom oktobra na 96%, lebo sú aj takí, ktorí rozširujú takéto informácie, ako keby nás vyzývali k tomu, že pohoda, klídek, tabáček. Nie je to tak. Hej? Akože my potrebujeme ten prítok toho plynu a je jedno, či ruského, alebo alžírskeho, alebo azerbajdžanského. Hej? Ale jednoducho potrebujeme a bez toho tú zimu prežijeme veľmi ťažko, iba s veľkými úsporami naozaj. A ak naozaj príde väčšia zima, lebo každý sa spolieha, že už tu bolo niekoľko rokov takej ľahšej zimy, takej priemernej zimy. Aj keď tiež úplne to nie je tak, lebo často viete, keď je tá zima miernejšia, tak potom trvá dlhšie, že ešte aj na jar vlastne ako keby bolo potrebné kúriť, hlavne v školách a v nemocniciach, viete, a v takýchto citlivejších verejných priestoroch. No a samozrejme v domácnostiach. Nemôžeme nechať penzistov alebo malé deti pri teplote 16 alebo 17 stupňov. Jednoducho ja si myslím, že nie každý je utužilý a nie každý vie odolávať takým nízkym teplotám. Čiže tam naozaj my musíme zabezpečiť, ako bolo aj povedané pánom Kremským, alternatívne zdroje toho plynu a jednoducho aj tu musíme zohľadňovať, že odkiaľ dovážame ten plyn a na aké kontrakty my pristúpime. Ak tí kontraktori potenciálne nás nútia ísť do dlhodobých kontraktov, tak je to úplne v rozpore s našou politikou, s Green Dealom, s klimatickým zákonom a podobne. Hej. A keď nakupujeme, viete, plyn od Azerbajdžanu, ktorý dneska hlavne dostáva Taliansko, je to vôbec teda morálne, ak Azerbajdžan nedávno napadol opäť Arménsko? Keď chceme nakupovať plyn od takých alternatívnych, by som povedal, dodávateľov, ako sú Katar alebo Alžírsko, tiež nie sú to podľa mňa úplne najdemokratickejšie režimy. Čiže ak hovoríme, že a už predtým sme hovorili, ako musíme diverzifikovať. Áno, my musíme čo najviac diverzifikovať, ale my nemôžeme sa dostať do závislosti plynovej od iných režimov, lebo to by bola veľmi zlá politika. Že musíme aj v tomto naozaj, čo sa týka ďalších rokov, pristupovať k tomuto veľmi racionálne, pragmaticky, ale zároveň aj berúc do úvahy naše nejaké základné hodnoty. Čiže to je jedna vec. Druhá otázka bola ohľadom tých slovenských opatrení?
Nie. Tá sa týkala toho, že do akej miery je to riziko, že sa zastavia tie dodávky, či máme alternatívy.
No ja si myslím, že riziko, či sa zastavia úplne tie dodávky, tu je a je živé. My jednoducho vieme, že môže sa to stať. Veď viete, aký je vývoj aj na Ukrajine a my sa nemôžeme spoliehať úplne na to, že Rusko bude naďalej dodávať.
Pán Kremský musí odísť, čiže thank you very much, Mr. Kremský.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Ja musím ísť na hlasovanie na 11. Neodchádzam, pretože by mi tu bola zima. Mne je úplne akurát, takže ja som z Liptova, takže asi som na to zvyknutý, ale dúfam, že to zvládnete. A ďakujem veľmi pekne za pozvanie a želám vám ešte príjemnú konferenciu dnes. Ďakujem.
Ďakujem, že ste prišli.
Ďakujem. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Takže naozaj, lebo problém aj s tými cenami, určite vy to viete lepšie ako ja, je ten, že nie je tu súlad, alebo ak je nejaká ešte vyváženosť medzi ponukou a dopytom, je veľmi krehká. A veľmi rýchlo sa môže narušiť. A tým pádom hneď ceny idú veľmi hore a na trhu dochádza k panike. Stále, aj keď teraz tlieskame tomu, ako sa darí znižovať tie ceny aj elektriny, aj plynu od tých cien, ktoré boli v auguste, tak sú stále niekoľkonásobne vyššie, ako boli takto pred rokom. A jednoducho my musíme nájsť aj v rozpočte peniaze, kde a ako my si môžeme dovoliť teda, z čoho zaplatiť to zastropovanie. A nad tým sa musíme už zamyslieť teraz. A naozaj to, čo som hovoril, a som rád teda, že aj pán Kremský s tým súhlasil, že využiť, a už bolo na čase o to požiadať, hovorím tú Európsku komisiu, na to, aby sme mohli my presúvať peniaze z podpory kohézie, to znamená z kohéznych fondov, štrukturálnych a investičných fondov, a aby sme mohli aj presúvať tieto peniaze dokonca aj do fondu obnovy alebo do plánu obnovy na to, aby sme ich mohli použiť na dobudovanie infraštruktúry. Ale tu samozrejme ja musím zdôraziť, že tá plynová infraštruktúra vždy musí byť retrofity, vždy musí byť už teraz inštalovaná takým spôsobom, aby mohla byť využiteľná aj na prenos teda zelených zdrojov ako vodíka, zeleného vodíka. Čiže bez toho súhlas Európskej komisie samozrejme nikdy nedostaneme, takže sa musíme orientovať takýmto spôsobom.
Thank you. Andrea, what about the dependence on Italy on Russian gas, and how do you see the risks of the stopping these supplies?
Well, as you know, Italy has been relying on Russian gas for developing its own gas market. I think the first 50 years you are celebrating were also linked to the fact that Soviet Union gas was brought to Italy at that time. So until last year we were having 40% dependency on Russian gas. So of course it's very hard to change overnight this dependency. We have in Italy promoted a structured diversification of supplies. Somebody somehow provoking at a webinar I attended to this summer was showing in a slide our current foreign minister that a few years back was against TAP and now shaking hands with President Aliyev. So we have come to, let's say, terms to some elements of evolution there. Storages are very important also in Italy. We have quite developed facilities there, quite full. But again, we are quite rushing on the fact that we have to have more supplies from new sources, new LNG sources. Of course, we can rely on a very well-established relationship by one of the major Italian oil and gas company, Eni, in Africa. At the same time, let me give you another perspective of that. We have to recognize and recall and acknowledge the fact that in the last 20 years, the change in the population in Europe was about 16 to 17 million people. The same increase happened in Algeria only. Nigeria, which is another very important country to rely on for gas, increased population of about 80 million people. So we have to take care, not just on our own needs, but we have to be prepared to support and finance also their own developments. Because otherwise we are risking all the way to focus on our Eurocentric approach. It is very important to look at. We are Europeans, and for sure we have to take care about us. But it's important, as I said before, that cooperation is a two-way movement. We cannot just say, you do things that I need, and then stop. We have to create a win-win solution. So it's very important, again, as I said before, we have the instruments, we have the technology, we have the competencies to support other developments. We have to be looking at things, and I appreciate the difficulty of, let's say, squaring the circle between long-term contracts and the Green Deal. At the same time, this calls for new creativity, new investment. I mentioned CCUS. If we are going to import green hydrogen from Chile, we have to develop technology first, because it's very difficult to export LNG from such a distance. Liquefied hydrogen is quite tough, almost 0 Kelvin. But at the same time, we have to develop a commercial and accountable certainty of the fact that we are going to import green products. So green certificates, because otherwise the NDCs will not be met. I'm entering into nitty-gritties there. But at the same time, taking back your question, diversification is, of course, a crucial matter. But diversification has to manage the interests of two parties, the producers and the consumers. I think we cannot just have long-term contracts as if we were in the early 90s, 25 years, but we cannot even mention the fact that the new long-term must be just 12 months. Otherwise, investments will not be flowing. So we have, again, the need to have a flexible and pragmatic approach there. I think that's the reasonable way forward. Again, not having the crystal ball into saying what will the future be. But I am sure that to arrive to a future that we are retrospectively looking at with good eyes is the fact that we have dealt with this energy crisis in a more pragmatic way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steiner.
Yes. I mean, what is a fact is that we actually need every gas molecule which we can get in these days, right? This includes Russian gas. So it is, who is the stronger one on this question, right? So this is what we all debate, right? Who is the stronger one? And unfortunately, in this case, it's a bit tricky for us, I have to say. And this is reflected on the market and in the gas prices. We're all speaking about the high prices which we have now. Look at the forward prices. We are on a level of forward prices which we have never seen before, even on the spot markets. So this fear of not having enough gas for the coming years, or the scarcity of gas, is actually reflected in an unprecedented high gas price level on the forward sector. The volatility on the forward side is enormous because of the uncertainty which we are facing in this market. This is all reflected there on both sides, clearly, on the supplier and on the consumer side. And we are here really on very high ones. How much this factor is, let's say this fear factor compared with the fundamental supply and demand factor, this is hard to define. But if you look at yesterday, on the day before yesterday, the lowest price was 166 euros per megawatt hours. Yesterday, the highest price was 199. So because of the call for, I don't know the right English word for this, for 300,000 people from Russia to went to war into Ukraine, prices jumped within really a little time by 40 euros. On a level of 170. That's quite significant, I have to say. But the other significant one, that actually prices came down again in the afternoon to the same level as it was before. Meaning they saw this, they felt the fear, but then they saw, okay, there will be hopefully still rational way forward, and therefore prices came down again. But still 170, 175, it's enormous. It's an enormous price level which we're actually having here, and this reflects that we still need this Russian gas and every Russian gas molecule in this market.
Thank you very much. Andrea, in his speech, mentioned also the European Investment Bank and its ban on the new gas projects. But in this situation, in terms of this gas supply shortages in Europe, should European Union support gas projects, Robert?
My take on that, Richard, is yes. Very simply put.
Yes, but maybe Robert has some influence.
No, I mean, and let me be clear on that. The European Investment Bank is not just influencing European projects.
Of course.
It's influencing international projects around the world. If I look at Mr. Kerry's statement last week saying we have to stop gas projects in Africa, how is this consistent with the fact that we are asking African countries to produce more? So we have to, again, revise the pragmatism vis-a-vis the idealization. Again, I like targets. I very much like targets which are demanding, which are requiring innovation, which are requiring to fight the climate change we are seeing. No doubt about that. But unfortunately, we have no single silver bullet. So we have, again, to make finance right, to make the doable investments right in the right timing. So that's a very simple point to me.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Ďakujem. Ja si myslím, že toto je veľmi ako rozhodujúca otázka v celom tomto procese a v celej tej problematike, ktorá je o tom, že či Európska únia si poradí s touto krízou alebo nie a aké, či správne lessons learned, či správne lekcie, ponaučenia si z nej zoberie aj do budúcnosti. A tu naozaj dochádza, už je najvyšší čas, aby sme si naozaj uvedomili, že musíme oddeliť ideológiu, aj tú zelenú ideológiu, progresívnu zelenú ideológiu, kde naozaj v teórii je to všetko super, že chceme dekarbonizovať a čo najrýchlejšie, že chceme prejsť od fosílnych palív iba ku obnoviteľným zdrojom, ale tento čas a táto kríza nám ukázala takto prstom alarm, že no ale buďme pritom pragmatickí, buďme racionálni a naozaj nevylučujme všetky možnosti, ako to riešiť, lebo inak môžeme spadnúť do obrovskej recesie a do obrovských problémov, obrovským krachom nielen jednotlivých podnikov, ale celých oblastí priemyslu a tým pádom k zníženiu aj celkovo životnej úrovni Európskej únie. A to hádam nikto nechce. Takže tu naozaj treba oddeliť tú ideológiu. Ja som za Green Deal, ja podporujem aj klimatický zákon a z toho vyplývajúce jednotlivé smernice, ktoré sme aj teraz v Európskom parlamente schvaľovali, či ide o RED 2, teda o direktívu o obnoviteľných zdrojoch, potom aj direktívu o úspore, o energetickej účinnosti. Ale to sú, viete, naozaj direktívy a smernice, ktoré idú dlhodobo dopredu, 10-20 rokov, ale my teraz čelíme konkrétnej situácii, čiže my musíme postupovať tak, ako sme aj teraz si myslím, že konečne v parlamente dobre rozhodli, a to bolo zmienené schválenie taxonómie, kde naozaj bola obrovská opozícia, aj viete, že skupina poslancov ide napadnúť túto taxonómiu, že vôbec Európska komisia nemala ani právo navrhnúť, aby plyn a jadro boli zaradené do tzv. Podmienečne zelených obnoviteľných zdrojov. Ale samozrejme tam sú tie podmienky a viete vy plynári lepšie ako ja, že tie podmienky pre zemný plyn sú veľmi tvrdé. Takže určite my neubližujeme, myslím si, nejakej zelenej politike, ak sme tam zaradili aj plyn. No a pokiaľ ide o napríklad 5. PCI list, teda alebo zoznam tzv. Projektov spoločného európskeho záujmu, tak sú tam zase zaradené aj samozrejme plynové projekty na budovanie a posilňovanie infraštruktúry, ale samozrejme opäť pod tou podmienkou, čo som hovoril aj pred chvíľou, že tá infraštruktúra musí byť pripravená na nesenie, na to, aby mohla niesť a aby mohli cez ňu prúdiť obnoviteľný plyn a vodík. Čiže bioplyn, vodík a teda hlavne zelený vodík. Čiže tu sú jasné stanovené podmienky a to sú tie, ktorými sami musíme riadiť a aj vy plynári musíte si toto naozaj uvedomiť, že inak podporu na budovanie infraštruktúry nikdy zo strany Európskej únie ani zo strany navrhovateľa tej Európskej komisie a už vôbec nie v Európskom parlamente dostanete, pretože tá ideológia tam je. A dlhodobo ten cieľ je, aby sme naozaj masívne prechádzali zo fosílnych palív aj z plynu na tie obnoviteľné zdroje energie. Čiže tá ideológia tu bude vždy, ale teraz, čomu čelíme, a to sa asi tu všetci sme sa v podstate zhodli, čelíme krízovej situácii, keď my musíme zabezpečiť bezpečnosť tých dodávok, aby sme mali plynu a elektriny dosť a musíme zabezpečiť, aby sme ich vedeli dostať ku koncovým užívateľom za dostupné ceny. Aby jednoducho to neviedlo ku krachu podnikov alebo celých odvetví priemyslu a aby to nedoviedlo do krachu aj naše domácnosti. Čiže toto sú asi podmienky, ale áno, tá aj reorientácia peňazí napríklad z Repower do fondu obnovy alebo z kohéznych fondov takisto na dobudovanie tej infraštruktúry. Pretože to, čo som spomínal tiež už predtým, jednoducho tie prepájače nemáme. Nemáme ani medzi Španielskom, Francúzskom, ani Francúzskom a Nemeckom. Hej. My sme tu naozaj v šťastnom prostredí, že tie aspoň prepájače máme. Ide o to, že ktoré nám teraz v tejto situácii poslúžia. Darmo sme síce otvorili a do budúcnosti bude vhodný prepájač medzi Poľskom a Slovenskom, ale my sa nemôžeme asi teraz spoliehať, že ten norský plyn bude cez tento prepájač prichádzať na Slovensko. Dokonca si myslím, že možno poslúži v tomto období naopak, že my budeme musieť plyn dodávať do Poľska, ale je dobre, že je a že do budúcnosti máme niečo také, o čo sa môžeme oprieť.
Exactly on this topic, I will read one question from Slido for all of you. So, do you think that the European Commission and politicians have learned lesson from this situation and give to security of supply and energy price the same importance as to green agenda? So, what do you think?
Robert. Začať ako poslanec Európskeho parlamentu, ja som to už vlastne naznačil, odpovedať na túto otázku. Ja si myslím, že my sme teraz v procese, že to ponaučenie začíname brať vážne. Lebo doteraz sme viacerí na to upozorňovali, ale celkovo, hovorím, tá tendencia, tá ideologizácia energetiky v Európskej únii prevládala. A ja som zástanca aj Green Dealu, ale samozrejme musíme to robiť pragmaticky, tak, aby sme si nestrieľali do vlastných nôh. Hlavne v čase, keď sme akoby vo energetickej vojne aj s Ruskom. A samozrejme, aj tam sme si strelili viackrát. A tu treba potom aj zobrať a povedať otvorene, že také Nemecko práve za vlády pani Merkelovej urobilo niektoré chybné kroky, keď vsadilo, dá sa povedať, všetky karty na ten ruský plyn ako ten základný zdroj energie, pritom ako sa sústredilo práve na to veľké rozmiestňovanie, na to veľké využívanie obnoviteľných zdrojov. No a tu sa ukázalo, že vsadiť všetky karty len na ruský plyn bola obrovská chyba. A za to vlastne platí teraz nielen Nemecko, ale aj celá Európska únia. Tak prosím, vyvarujme sa a preto diverzifikácia a nie sústredenie sa, zameranie sa alebo padnutie do závislosti opäť od jedného, dvoch alebo troch dodávateľov. My potrebujeme, aby ani jeden dodávateľ nedodával viac ako nejakých 15-20%. Aj to je už veľa podľa mňa dnes, lebo tak je aj volatilný trh, čo ukazuje, ako bolo aj ilustrované, že stačí nejaký pohyb niekde a hneď ceny vyletia o štvrtinu alebo o 30-40%. A potom ďalšie opatrenie, ktoré inak my potrebujeme aj na úrovni Európskej únie, konečne ja si myslím, ale musíme zase si to rozmyslieť, ako to urobiť, je reforma trhu, napríklad aj s plynom. Akože neviem ako vy, ale ja v dnešnej dobe nechápem, ako môže TTF v Amsterdame fungovať tak, ako funguje a spôsobuje takú volatilitu tých spotových cien. Konečne my ako Európska únia zasiahnime a urobíme niečo s tým. Zreformujme to, lebo inak to nie je udržateľné. A trpíme všetci, trpí celá ekonomika. Jednoducho, my nemôžeme stále tolerovať, že nejaké veľké hedžové fondy odniekiaľ skúpia také množstvo a hrajú na rast cien plynu a využívajú to a potom ženú tú cenu plynu do takých úrovní, že je to pre nás neudržateľné a my tu riešime krízovú situáciu. Tak urobme niečo s tým a skoncujme s tým.
Thank you. Andrea?
Well, I think we are learning the lesson. We are already learning the lesson. We have, in European terms, taken out security supply of the agenda for too many years. We were somehow enjoying, of course, the fact that we were having secure, affordable, competitive energy. And indeed, nobody complained when prices were at $5 to $6 per MBTU in the lows of the outset of the COVID, for sure. Having said that, I think European Union and its members will also have a good possibility to exchange more views at large, combining energy security, new investments, and climate challenges at COP27. Why I'm saying so? Because there will be, for sure, a very solid African statement on behalf of gas. for that very reason. So they are ready to step up in their investment, in their exports, but of course it's very important also on their side to have this energy, because again, development is something that requires energy. And of course, population development, as I mentioned, is in other regions. So we have to regain on secure supply the concept of diversification. Diversification means cooperation. Cooperation means looking at others' needs also, not just us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steiner?
I think it's a hard learning. Right, it's a very hard learning what was happening here. I hopefully that it's a learning. When we in this room, we know about the importance of natural gas for the industry, for the households, for power production, for the industry. And I think this element, how important natural gas in this overall energy mix, was a bit forgotten or neglected under this green agenda. So in this case, it's a very hard learning. And I think the best case for this hard learning is the German Green Energy Minister. I mean, what he has done in order to change the picture for Germany is just unimaginable. I mean, they will be 2024, 2025, they will have so much regasification capacity that they will be able to offset Russian gas. I mean, that's enormous. And it's a green energy minister. So that's something I think which I have to say it's a learning, I would say, of the importance of energy for the industry and for the people, and that every commodity has an important role in there. And we are now in this transition phase. We were speaking a lot about the green agenda and a lot about renewables and wind and solar, but it's not there yet. And I think this was the hard learning which we have seen, and that's the consequence of the high prices which we see on the market, and also on the electricity side, because it's not just enough there to accommodate low prices in such a war, actually. So I think this is the hard learning here.
Thank you. It's also one question from Slido, I think, for you. Market prices for natural gas have fallen significantly over the past few weeks. How likely is that this trend will continue?
So that's a very tricky question, right? If I look at the forward prices, they actually move quite closely and correlated with the spot prices, which is really quite remarkable. A forward price of 200 euros per megawatt hours for a yearly contract 2023 and above 100 for the next years to come, that's a lot, I have to say. That's really a lot. And I very much appreciate what you were saying about this topic on this volatility. I think that's a case, actually, and even I'm in this industry, right? But maybe in this extreme situation in which we are in, we have to look more closely on market surveillance. So what is actually happening on those markets, and what is the behavior of some of these players, especially on the TTF, which are closely linked with LNG. That's something new for us. That's maybe something new for us, and that's something which we have to look closely at it in order to see what it is. But it will not change the price level. It will not change the level in which we are. And the volatility on the one hand, or the volatility is something which is there in the market, right? If you have the fear that the Russian gas is stopping, you are paying more. For some reason, there were people who were buying a yearly contract, CAL 23, for 350 euros. Who is there, by the way? Who is there? So why are you buying 350 euros for next year? And that's, so there's a security of supply issue, that you need this gas. You want to have this gas, either for power production, either for the industry, because you can accommodate these high gas prices in your product which you produce, or even for serving the households, and you think that this price will be paid by somebody, by the household, by the industry, or by the state with the subsidies. So security of supply has a value, and this value is more than ever reflected in these market prices, and that's something which is really, really remarkable.
And
my 2 cents,
yes,
my 2 cents on the very, very high price that Gottfried was mentioning is the potential risk of having to replenish storages very rapidly next year under any scenario. So that will call for a rush in that respect, in my view.
Does the market influence also maybe some financial speculations? What do you think?
Well, I think there was some allusion to that.
I mean, what is speculation? So that's and what is bad about speculation? So I think this is something which is you have a market, and this market you operate. I think it is more important. The question is, how do you supply your customer? How can you make sure that you are actually supplying your customer in a market condition, under competitive conditions, at the best possible price, and that you will stay as a supplier in the market? And as a government or as a regulator, you make sure, if you have a customer for the winter, that you are able to supply to him, and that you're not a company which are kind of then not doing this, so with false or fake expectations for the supply of gas. I think that's the more relevant question than what is the speculation, and is there companies who are trying to make. I think speculation, in a way, if you look at from the stock exchange market, that's more a matter of efficiency. It's actually taking out inefficiencies and make the markets and everything more efficient. But for the gas industry, I think it's more relevant to make sure that you're actually supplying your customer at the most and best price level in these competitive conditions. And with the speculation element, if there are market players which distort market prices, if there is something going wrong because somebody has the power to influence a TTF market, then of course you have to look at it. You have to look at market surveillance, you have to look at REMIT, you have all the instruments available, and then you have to look at this. But that's the case, yes.
Thank you. We got maybe some 2 or 3 minutes more. So one last question from Slido. Is the shale gas an option for EU?
V Európskom parlamente minimálne preto určite nie je podpora, lebo vyrábať, produkovať alebo extrahovať bridlicový plyn v Európe je určite drahšie ako niekde v Amerike. Máme asi prísnejšie normy, aj zelené, ekologické. Máme väčšiu hustotu obyvateľstva a jednoducho celkovo asi parlament napríklad takúto cestu by nepodporil a nemyslím si ani, že takáto iniciatíva by prišla zo strany Európskej komisie. Ale ako bolo povedané, žiadne options, žiadne možnosti netreba úplne vylúčiť, ale ja sám osobne nie som za. A čo sa ešte týka, ak môžem tiež dodať, čo sa týka tých zásob, to bolo veľmi správne povedané, zásob plynu, našich rezerv. Pri takejto situácii, aká je a ako sa vyvíja, tak môžeme predpokladať naozaj, že niekedy na jar budú tie zásobníky úplne prázdne. A už teraz sa musíme dokázať zamyslieť nad tým, čím ich naplníme, ak už nebude vôbec tedy ruský plyn. Máme už teraz teda pripravené alternatívne B plány, čím, akým plynom a odkiaľ a za akú cenu a za akých podmienok, ak nás budú tlačiť do dlhodobejších kontraktov. Dnes treba o tom uvažovať, že nielen táto zima bude ťažká, ale môže byť rovnako ťažká aj tá ďalšia zima.
Andrea?
Let me first take the shale gas issue. I acknowledge the fact that it is a very difficult option for EU. At the same time, it was very difficult also to talk about CCUS a few years ago, and things have changed. So let's try to see how potentially saying, oh, please, others outside Europe, you produce shale gas and we are benefiting from that, or there is an additional, let's say, element of thinking there. So it's not an easy question. Of course, we have been strongly debating and with not positive results. I think shale gas, not for the EU, but for the UK possibly, is an option to go. Of course, sure, things have been changing also there. So it's something that we have to look, as I said in my introductory remarks, if this is an option for European companies and countries, I think we are best placed to make shale gas as the benchmark environmentally compliant standard in the world possible. because we have the technology, we have the social license to gain, we have, of course, the understanding of the elements surrounding that. So if this would be the case, and I would not say it is the case for Europe at large, but in some specific areas, and it will not solve it all in any case, but we can do it best practice. So that's something that we can possibly look at. Again, in the wave of pragmatism and delivery, because again, it's something that we have to look at, not just for the next winter, the following one. I think there is at least 3 to 4, 5 years to look at in a quite tense situation going forward, honestly speaking.
Mr. Steiner, maybe would you like some?
The topic was actually mentioned before by you in the case of the long-term contracts with countries in Africa or somewhere else, right? So can we commit to a long-term contract in Europe for gas for such a project against the green agenda? I mean, Austria wants to be carbon neutral by 2040. Considering the investments for shale gas and the gas produced and so on, and the demand, I think it's a challenging business plan, I have to say. And that's the same thing for the EU overall, because if you have completed the discussions, the political discussions on shale gas, you still have to develop it. You have to have the approvals and then produce the gas and then find the demand for it. And this might be a challenging issue, I have to say.
If I may take on that, one point that we tend to forget about the Paris Agreements and the COP26 agreements is the so-called Article 6. What is Article 6? It means international cooperation on climate challenge. We have been inclined to look at abating emissions in Europe by Europeans only. As I mentioned at the outset, we have other geographies which are playing a very substantial increase in the emissions going forward, and we have to, again, create a best path for not just ETS, but also voluntary carbon market to be very well developed, again, to be trackable, accountable, financeable going forward. That's where I come from. So it's very important that we do not lose sight of the fact that we are looking at net zero, and what net zero means is something that we have to reason on going forward.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of the first panel. Thank you for our panelists, Peter Kremski, Robert Heischel, Andreas Steger, and Gottfried Steiner. Thank you very much. And thank you for your attention. And now we have a break for half an hour, and we will be back for the second panel. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much. Díky moc.